Hey everyone, my name is Captain Jeremy Theron. I'm a United States Coast Guard licensed captain, also an engineer, a diver, and I run an outdoor show with my family called Real Hazardous. Post videos on YouTube and Instagram and places like that. And we're doing this podcast today, or it's also going to be a video online if you're watching through YouTube. But so yeah, today we're going to talk about wahoo fishing.
Yeah, so wahoo fishing is Captain Jeremy's favorite kind of fishing, and you can understand it. Wahoo's it can be all or nothing day.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was a prime example. You know, we patrol 5 hours and then get a hit, and then boom, had 5 fish in less than 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
5 for 5, didn't even lose any of them, and some nice fish too. But actually, one of the better fish to eat in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely strong game fish.
It's in Hawaii they're called ono, which means delicious. So it's Hawaiian's name of fish, delicious. It's probably delicious.
I think they said oh no because they lose so many of them that they run fast. Oh no, we lost another one. But anyhow.
Yeah.
So, but so wahoo. I caught my first wahoo when I was probably in my 20s. Mm-hmm. Bottom fishing with a flat line out. Caught a 65 pounder, and we'll have a picture of that. But that was pretty crazy that day.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really do a lot of wahoo. Caught a couple on the Keys over the years, small wahoo, and then we kind of got into it. What, about 5 years ago, maybe longer?
Longer than that.
Okay, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
But the thing about wahoo fishing is when you go out most of the time.
What's that?
What time of the year do you go out?
For us, it's the winter.
Right. So and we've left the house when it's in the 30s. We had ice on the boat.
Yeah.
We go out there. So
it's pretty bad for Florida.
It is. But when you get out to the Gulf Stream, the temperature's a lot warmer because of the water temperature. You know, mostly in the around 70s and all. But
so just a backstory, like, you know, I started out as a kid, you know, fishing. Went from ponds to the river and wanted to get into offshore. So we got into offshore fishing, and kingfish was really fun. I really enjoyed trolling for kingfish. It's a fast fish, strips drag, just fun game fish to fight.
Right.
And you know, going through like magazines and stuff in high school, I remember seeing like wahoo articles. And I seen this one article, I think I still have the article in the Florida Sportsman, and it was talking about high-speed trolling for wahoo. Picture was this big 3-motor boat trolling, you know, and it looked like they were pretty much on plane. I mean, they were going pretty fast, had these bent butts, and I read the article and had big lures that you troll really fast, and the wahoo was like a kingfish on steroids.
Right.
So,
but much better eating.
Yeah, and so I was pretty excited about that. So I'm like, dude, I should, you know, we need to go wahoo fishing. And, you know, I'd asked my dad, like we talked about at the time, we didn't have a big enough boat to go that far out.
Right.
And so, you know, I'd talk to people, go to fishing seminars and talk to his buddies, you know, trying to get a ride, you know, to go wahoo fishing. And
we went with Troy that time. That was probably one of your first.
Yeah, finally we had a friend. He had a 26-foot boat, and he was going wahoo fishing, and so he offered for us to go. I was like, sure. Had to skip a day of college. You know, I've been wanting to go for literally years, and I finally got the call. You know, put me in coach.
It was rough that morning too, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting. It was neat for me. Because, you know, I'd done all this studying of wahoo, and it kind of like, when I finally did it, it changed the way I seen them, these fish.
Right.
So at the time, and I think it's, I don't know, still, I call it a myth or stereotype, whatever. It was to catch wahoo, you had to go very early. You had to use dark color lures, and you had to use deep running lures. Mm-hmm. And when we get out there, we start trolling, and we're not high-speed trolling. We're trolling about 9 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Pulling a mix of some Ballyhoo on skirts and some lures. And we had this C&H Alien, which is like a chugger popping lure, popping on the surface.
It looks good popping out of that water.
Yeah, it was a mahi-colored bright green. you know, we start trolling. I'm like, this isn't how you catch wahoo. You know, we need to be high speed trolling. We need to be getting it. Big heavy lures, trolling weights. So I'm like, this is interesting. I don't know if we're gonna catch anything. Well, probably about 20, 30 minutes into the trip, this big 80-pound wahoo skies in the air and hits that alien lure on the way down.
They have all mono?
It was all mono. There's no wire. But we caught that fish on a pin 16.
That was a long fight, yeah, pin 16. He about spooled it.
Right.
And then, in fact, during that fight, I think you caught a nice tuna.
Yeah.
Waiting to get him in. And we fought him all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, put him in, and then we ended up getting, what, 3 more?
Yeah, we ended up catching 4 wahoo that day. And I was kind of like, oh, yeah, this is easy.
Yeah.
Different, but I was like, okay, sure. We just went out there and caught 4 wahoo first trip.
Yeah. And then we went to the Keys that time. I remember we were out catching dolphin, and you wanted high speed. I'm like, we have to. And he said, let's try it. So we hadn't been high speed, not even 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Man, something started blistering. Jeremy's like, I think we're hung. I said, yeah, but it ain't on the bottom. That's a fish stripping that line out like that.
So basically, like, we did that day of fishing and had a great time catching wahoo. And fast forward, we finally got our big enough boat, the boat we have now, the Real Hazardous 27 Contender. So it's like, all right, now we can go wahoo fishing on our own.
2010, we got it. Yeah.
So that was when we started. I think we went with Troy the year before, 2009, and then 2010 we got our boat and we started wahoo fishing.
Right.
And that was when we were getting the gear to do high speed trolling, and I think we tried a couple times on our other boat in the Keys, and it seemed like it was not working well. There was a ton of pressure. Like, we weren't used to pulling that much drag.
We didn't have the rods for it at the beginning, I don't think.
And so we're in the Keys, one year, and like, man, while we're here, I want to try high-speed trolling.
We've just been blistering the mahi. I think we caught some good mahi today. We
went out in the evening fishing, and we were catching mahi, and the sun was going down, and I'm like, hey, let's just high-speed in. We're heading in anyways. It'll give us some experience. And we started trolling, not a minute or two in, all of a sudden the drag starts screaming. I'm like, man, it just seemed hard to believe that we could actually have had a wahoo, just like that fast.
Right. I don't think we caught one down there since either, have we?
Yeah, no, not since. But we catch the fish. It was a pretty nice wahoo, especially for the Keys. And
there was some floating debris out there, and I think that's what was hanging around where we were catching the mahi.
Could have been, yeah.
I think that's what held them in the area. And they use that a lot, like in the Gulf. I think when they go out, they don't even start fishing until they see something floating.
But yeah, so then we start fishing up in Jacksonville, start doing the ledge trips. Totally, pretty much new to us. Didn't really have anyone to go with us who knew a lot about it, so we were kind of figuring it out as we went.
Right.
Sometimes we'd pull bait, sometimes we'd pull lures, and definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way. Lost a lot of lures.
Caught some nice wahoo. And then a couple times with doubles too.
Yeah.
That's when we learned to leave one out once you got one on for a little bit before we started pulling it in.
But yeah, it was kind of funny, as getting to where we're at now, like those myths that I talked about, it's got to be early, it's got to be deep, it's got to be dark, not true at all.
Right.
I've caught, last year, we caught all of our fish from noon to 2. 5 fish in 2 hours, middle of the afternoon.
Right, middle of the day.
And our best color was pink, white and pink. So light color lures. Some were down, some were not, some were high speed, some were bait speed. But I think a lot of that came from the Bahamas and South Florida. And I think it may matter more there. I don't fish there, so I'm not going to say. I mean,
right.
They talk a lot about tides, and tides, I could see tides mattering in the Bahamas and in South Florida. But in Northeast Florida, tides don't matter. Not for wahoo, you know,
that far out, yeah.
what the St. John's River is doing, that's 60 miles from where we're fishing.
Right. No tidal effect at all out there, huh?
It does not have any bearing that I've found. Now, there are tides out there, there are currents,
Yeah, rips.
and it affects the fish. You know, sometimes you're bottom fishing, like, man, the current's blasting, different directions. But, like, does the low tide affect?
Right.
I don't think so.
I think the biggest thing is the bait, and I think we've learned that, you know. If you're not seeing bait, you know, well, two things. One is seeing bait, and one is getting hits. You know, when you catch a fish or you get a couple good hits in the thing, you know that the fish are there. And then so you kind of work that area pretty strong. The day before we caught the 5, me and 2 other guys went out. We had 2 early. We caught them early. And then ours was, like you said, noon. So,
Right.
So, you know, obviously the tides and the currents, that much difference probably didn't make a difference. But.
So wahoo fishing, it's not like bottom fishing. Bottom fishing, you'll go out there and you'll be catching fish. Even on a slow day, you'll catch a fair amount of fish.
Right.
May not be the fish you want, may not be the size you want.
Right.
But stuff is going to hit your line more likely.
Right.
Conversely, on a slow day of wahoo, you don't catch anything.
Right. Yeah, so sometimes it's all or nothing, you know. But when you do get them, it don't take long to fill that box up. You know, you get four fish or 5 fish that are, you know, 40, 50 pounds. That's a lot of fish. You're good for the year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if you're wanting to go wahoo fishing, you need to have, you know, the right expectations. Like, wahoo fishing is more like, you know, deer hunting. You know, you may sit in the stand the whole time and not kill anything. You might not see anything. You got to be patient.
And you got to work the areas too.
Yeah.
Be prepared to move if you have to. You know, change up your techniques. You know, maybe if the high speed ain't working, go to low speed. You know, we're going to try live bait. This will be the first time we tried live bait, right?
But like the fish itself, you know, it's big game mentality. You know, you need to, I'd say, treat wahoo fishing more like hunting. You know, you're going after a few fish. I mean, there are stories of people catching, you know, 7, 8, 10, and it does happen. But realistically, you know, you're going for a few fish, and these fish, you know, in our area, 30, 40 pounds is a small wahoo.
Right.
We've got some really big wahoo up here. You know, during the tournament, several boats are catching 100+ pounds, you know, 75, 80, you know, isn't terribly uncommon. So you've got a chance at some big fish.
All right, so when we're going out, what's the first thing that we watch for when we're headed offshore?
First thing, well, I'm watching the temperature.
I think that's the biggest thing right there, that temperature break.
I think, you have to be in warm enough water.
Right.
But there's not a set temperature.
Right. Usually just that jump. You know, 2, sometimes 3 degree jump. You get a 5 degree jump in a half a mile, you're probably in a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, like one of our days several years ago, we were going to the spot, and it was pretty chilly, and it quickly jumped up, I think from like 67, 68 to 71, 72. And I say quickly, within a few miles, not like, oh, I was here and bam. It wasn't like, you know, 1 minute, 1 second I'm here, or the next I'm here. It was, you know, it was still a few miles, but it was good warm water.
Right.
You know, I like 72, 71, 72, 74.
Right.
That's a good range for me.
Now, what about your spread?
Well, before we get to the spread, the next big thing I would say, in general, for fishing in general, really, the most important thing to me, the thing I try to put the most effort and the most energy into is where are the fish?
Right.
Because you can have the best spread in the world, you can have the best lures in the world, you can have the freshest bait in the world. There's no fish there, you're not going to catch anything.
No. It may look good back there, but they ain't going to catch a fish.
Yeah. Conversely, if you're where the fish are biting, you don't need all that great. If they're hungry and they're feeding, they're going to hit.
Right. And
So-
we found that out last year in the 5. We just pulled all different kinds of baits, and we're getting fish pretty much on any kind of bait, slow speed, high speed.
That's what we tried. We intentionally mixed it up. Let's do high speed. Let's do regular speed. See if we catch them, and we caught them both ways.
Right.
And so basically, what that points to, and what I would get at next is it a fishy area? Mm-hmm. So just because temperature is good doesn't mean there's any fish there.
Right.
So the next thing I'm doing is I'm looking for, good markings.
Bait pods.
Bait, fish on the surface,
right.
Or underneath. If I mark a big school, that's all a great sign.
If you see birds, usually that's a pretty good sign that there's some bait around, especially if they're hitting the water.
Yeah, birds is good, but it's funny. Like I rarely see birds offshore Jacksonville.
Yeah, you're right. Not like the Keys. Huh?
Like Keys, we're looking for birds. In Jacksonville, it's if you saw birds, then that would be a great sign. But it happens very infrequently for me.
Right. But usually them birds will be along a rip or weed line where there's some minnows or something.
Yeah.
On there. So if you see birds out there, there probably some kind of structure that's holding bait.
Yeah.
They're waiting to get a shot at.
And with Wahoo, most of the time, it's kind of good because I'm not looking for the same structure like for mahi. Mm-hmm. Like I'm looking at bottom numbers, and that's good because bottom ain't moving around.
Right.
Mahi, I'm looking for a rip or floating debris, right, which is constantly moving in the currents. But bottom, I can go to my numbers year after year.
Right.
They may not have Wahoo, but
certain numbers seem to hold Wahoo on somewhat of a regular basis. And even if they're not right at that number, if you're high speed trolling, you can kind of loop and figure eight and all, mm-hmm, and you'll find most of those ledges, like along the Elton bottom and all, they'll have chunks along the way, and
mm-hmm,
you can kind of get you a little pattern there, and you work it and find out maybe where the bait is.
Yeah.
The bait, because that bait will move the same way, mm-hmm, and that fish will follow that bait.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Once I get to a good area, what I think will be a good area, ideally good bait, good temperature. The structure is more about the bait. I don't really care about structure except for the fact that the bait probably cares about the structure.
Right, that's where they have them fish for. That's why they're around there.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. But, some of the area isn't like a ledge per se. It's like a live bottom. So it may not show anything on the bottom, but the fish like the area.
Right.
And it could be a big area. So like you're saying, you kind of got to loop around and find where the bait's holding at, and stay on top of it because the bait will probably be moving.
I think when we went out after me and Alton and Leon went out, mm-hmm, we were 5 or 10 miles away from when we got in ours versus where we caught them that day before. Mm-hmm. So if there was a good school, they may have moved because the 2 that we caught was back to back. We hit them pretty hard, and we didn't fish much after that. When we got the 2, we came in pretty quick. But
gotcha.
Then when we went out the next day, we worked the same area, I think, early, and then kept moving around and finally found where the fish were at.
So what I like talking about my spread, the high speed trolling is nice because you can look around,
cover a lot of area.
Yeah, cover a lot of ground. So kind of while I'm looking for the right bait and the right conditions, I've got lines out. Obviously, if a fish hits, well, that's the best sign that a wahoo's in the area is if you hook a wahoo.
Right. Or like we did last year when we started catching them small bonita, and we caught 3 or 4 back to back. That kind of tells you that there's a good school of bait around there.
Yeah. But that's obviously the best sign is once you catch the first wahoo, I feel like things are generally pretty easy. One, you feel good because you caught a wahoo, so it's okay, at least we got
supper.
Something.
Yeah, we got supper in the
Well, yeah, just having that fish for me, it's okay, we caught one. We set out to catch it, we caught it. But the good thing is wahoo, I wouldn't say they're schooling fish like mahi, but they'll often be with other wahoo simply for the fact that there's food around.
Right.
Like,
Being on the same thing.
you go to a buffet and there's a bunch of people around. I mean, they may not know each other or care
They're
about
all
each other,
eating,
but
though, aren't they?
that's where the food is. So that's where all of them are. So there's a good chance there's more wahoo there.
Right.
So if I catch one, then I'll work that area.
Now, the 5 that we caught, we literally caught, all 5 of them probably within, a quarter or half a mile from every one? We kept one over the same spot?
Yeah, it was real close. And there was the bait marking. We were basically trolling right by that bait. When you go through the bait, you probably get a hit.
Yeah, and we had the place to ourselves too, so that was pretty nice.
Yeah. But, again, it's one of those things that, you have to troll and find these fish. And,
Be patient.
We have a tournament here in Northeast Florida, and it's like about 2 months long. We actually have a couple different ones, but right now is the Northeast Florida Wahoo Shootout. And it's 2 months long, and they have a chart from years past, of different people when they fished, and you can see what they catch. And even like some of the first place, top 3, top 5, they have days where they totally didn't catch anything.
Right. Yeah, they'd be blank one day, and then the next day they'd come up with a good. Yeah, I mean, one guy last year, the last day of the tournament, actually won the tournament.
Yeah.
On 3 fish, 2 of them were 90 or 100 pounds.
He caught 2, and they were both over 100, I believe.
Yeah, can you imagine?
One was,
that?
I think, 120.
Everybody wants to get 100. Can you imagine getting 2 like that?
Yeah. But that's the thing with wahoo fishing is, if you want to catch wahoo, you gotta fish for wahoo, and take all day. You may troll all day, and finally find them at the end. You might hear a guy like, "Yeah, I went out and caught 5 wahoo." You're like, "Okay, that's pretty cool. That's probably like one every hour and a half or so." Not necessarily. It could have been like with us.
1 every 3 hours or something.
You spend 5 hours looking, not getting a bite, and then boom, you find them, you stay on them, and you catch a bunch.
Right.
So there's got to be that patience, that discipline.
And several times that we've got, when we get that first one, we come back, we would boom, boom. One time we even had a big wahoo, and we were putting them in our short bait, the real deep bait, and we were only going, 5 miles an hour?
Yeah, we were, we just gaffed one.
Yeah.
So we had that lure out, and yeah, we were just like kind of idling 4 or 5 miles an hour. Wahoo hit it.
I mean, he blistered it too. In fact, he ended up breaking the swivel on it.
Yeah, the swivel broke.
But we weren't going that fast at all. So, high speed's good for covering areas. I think once you find the fish, I don't know that high speed is any better than going low speed. Just mainly getting the bait there for them to work on.
Yeah, I mean, it both tactics. Everyone has its advantages and disadvantages.
Right. The good thing about high speed is you rarely ever catch a amberjack high speed.
Yeah.
Now low speed, we've got some amberjack, and I think we got one amberjack high speed one time, didn't we?
I was going kind of a slow high speed. I was going like 12, so kind of on the slow end of high speeding. But yeah, we caught an amberjack.
And we've caught mahi on the high speed and even kingfish on the high speed, but you're way more likely to catch a wahoo than anything else high speed.
Right. So my high speed spread, generally 4 or 5 lines, 2 bent butts, 2 off the sides. I'll run them off tag lines. If it's not too rough, sometimes I'll run them straight off the gunnel. I do different things to make. I do this with all fishing. I try to make the process, as easy to follow, as efficient to get out as possible. Because if you don't have your stuff together, it can take a little while to put, when you got to take a big lure, you got to hook it up to a shock lead, you got to hook that to the weight, and you got to hook it to a line, and you got to let it back. And do that with 4 or 5 rods, it can take a while. So I have all my rigs in a bucket prepped, wrapped around a Cuban yo-yo. And all I got to do is hook my fishing rod, hook that snap swivel up to the weight, and it feeds off. No tangles, nice and smooth.
Right.
I don't throw baits in the water. I've seen people do that. I don't do that because you throw it, and a lot of times it'll flip over itself. The hook can get fouled in the skirt. It's just kind of a bad practice.
Right.
you don't want to be trolling for an hour and then bring your line and only realize it's messed up and it's not going to catch a fish. You just
Right. You've been wasting all that time.
Right. So having good, quality, letting it back. I've got my lines marked with wax thread. So everything goes back.
What's first?
Basically, my first is the farthest.
Usually the shotgun?
Yeah, the way back, yeah. I'll put it in the center. It might be 300, 350 feet, if it's a Wahoo one.
Yeah, that's a long way back, too.
Yeah, and it either has no weight or maybe like a 1 pound weight. Send that back and then go.
That far back is to get it out of that white water or that disturbed water, right? So they can see it a little better.
Not really. I mean, it's definitely out. I mean, it was out long ago. I'm not really concerned about the white water. I mean, if you had it way at your boat, but really, it's the water's done cleared up. It's just kind of different. It's more about having a spread that you can turn. It's
not get tangled up.
Yeah. So, and it's just to be different, right?
Right.
It's 350 feet back. It's long. Maybe the fish are skittish today. I then go to my next one, which is like 275, and it's on a little bit bigger weight, like a 24 ounce. My next one's 225 on like a 32 ounce. Then I got my close one, which is like, or almost second to close. It's 125 on the bent butt with like a 48 ounce. And then the closest is about 70 feet back on a 64 ounce.
So tell them how you know what your distances is. How do you know when to stop it?
Well, I put the wax thread.
Right.
So I tie that off. So when I see that wax thread, I can stop it.
And you don't stop it until when? It's
Till I see
past
the
the guides.
I actually leave it right at the guide.
Right, but you don't want it before there because sometimes it'll get hung up in pop the line?
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't if you put it on right and you got the right rod set up. Like, I don't know, I hear guys saying that, but if that's the case, I mean, eventually, when you get a fish on, you're going to reel that into the guides. And that fish could at any time make another run. Again, if you check your rods, that shouldn't be an issue either. So if you want to let it just pass it, that's fine.
Right.
But at those spreads with those weights, I can make a pretty hard turn. Like I put my camera in the water, made some hard turns, and I can see the weight sometimes just in camera view, but it's nowhere near getting tangled.
Yeah, because the different poundages are usually use 2 pounds on either side.
Yeah, like each spot has a different size weight. So, when you turn when you turn this way, like to the right, that starboard bait is going to drop because it's going slower than the outside bait because you're making a turn. So, having something heavier and closer, worst case, it's going to drop, and that other lure is going to come over it. But then when you straighten out, it's going to pull it back and.
And we get a lot of fish on those close-in rods, too.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, don't be afraid to do close.
And you're running, what, 64, sometimes even heavier weights?
64 is the heaviest I run.
48 and 64?
Yeah, they make heavier ones. Haven't done it yet. But
yeah. If the other's working, why change it?
With bait, it's not terribly different. I mean, I've still got the 5 rods. Usually the ones on the outside off the outrigger, I probably won't have a weight on that. I'll let them be closer towards the surface. They're still kind of heavy, so they'll be underwater most of the time.
Right.
The bent butts, I'll still do something to keep them down. Usually a weight, sometimes an inline planer.
And using that way back, we'll run like a rattle jet or something on it?
Yeah, so a rattle jet, more for like tuna or something.
Or mahi will jump on them too. Even Wahoo, we've had them cut off by Wahoo that's come up, and because it's monoliter and they're pretty light, usually you lose them. But
yeah, but that's kind of the spread that we run. So Wahoo fishing's pretty fun. It's definitely can be tough. Takes a lot of patience.
But it can be very rewarding because once you get into them, There ain't nothing like it. I mean, when to hear that
Right.
drag screaming and just the total craziness on the boat.
Yeah.
And you start throwing, 50, 60, 70-pound fish in there.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't got 100 yet. We probably 80 is the biggest we've gotten.
Yeah.
But, we're hoping this year's going to be the year for the big boy.
Mm-hmm. And again, wahoo fishing, it's more like deer hunting. And by that, you got to really pay attention. It may seem like you're doing nothing. Like when you're trolling around, it's not like nap time. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe one guy wants to take a nap, but like when I'm trolling, I expect everyone to be paying attention. Like they need to be watching the rods.
Yeah.
You may get a hit, something come up to it.
Sometimes all you'll see is you might even hear like click, click, just where you just hit it at one time, and then you're like, did I get a bite? And then you pull in, you got half of a bait. But if you see that, you can drop back on it, and a lot of times you can get a hit, which is what we did last year.
Yeah, if you're doing like bait,
right,
high speed, I wouldn't drop back.
No.
But that's the thing. Like you got to really pay attention. Like there's one time we had a lure back there, and it had cable, 275-pound cable, and I look back and I'm like, man, this doesn't seem. It's not trolling right. Something's weird. It's pulling more drag than it should. So we brought it in, and it was all fouled up, and something had like cut off, the last part of the leer. It cut through the 275-pound cable without ever peeling drag.
Yeah, that was a sharp-toothed fish, whatever it was.
Yeah, it was something big and very sharp teeth.
Could have been a 100-pound wahoo.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been. I mean, I guess it could have been like a big shark, maybe.
Usually you don't get sharks on was that high speed?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been mako, but yeah, I mean, probably my biggest guess was like a really big wahoo just came up and just, bam, just shredded that wire.
Yeah, so that's really the kind of advantage to high speeding is you don't get too much trash fish. Mm-hmm. You have to be pretty fast to chase those baits.
Yeah.
That's the advantage to going high speed. Probably the disadvantage is you probably don't get as many of the 100-pounders. I guess some of them do on high speeding, but
yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. Mm-hmm. You definitely got a good shot at it.
I think them 100-pounders, they want a good heavy fat bait when they go to bite because that's a lot of energy.
Well, have you seen the world record wahoo? Mm-hmm. It's got out of Cabo San Lucas. It was 180.
And he's flying about like that, wasn't he?
And he'd hit one of the mean green trolling lures.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it was only like that big. I mean, it looked like nothing compared to that fish.
Well, that was like the kingfish we caught last year that we finished in the tournament. We had a small pokey on that.
Yeah.
And he passed, ribbon fish and other stuff, and he just ate the small pokey, so you never know.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you always got a shot of a big fish.
That's right.
It can be a big lure, but it doesn't have to be.
Look at us. We eat butterbeans. They ain't very big, are they?
No.
All right.
A lot of them.
That's it.
But yeah, so that's pretty much.
That's how the setup is, and then we'll get more into on another show when you get a fish on and what everybody should be doing on the boat, because that hooking them is one thing, putting them in the boat is another.
Yeah.
And a lot of people lose fish at the boat, so you really got to be on your toes on them, and you don't get hurt.
Right.
Flying lures.
I heard one guy say something like, yeah, most fish are lost, the last 30 seconds of the fight. And I'm like, aren't they all lost like the last second?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the end of the fight's losing. Well, that was the end of the fight.
He probably meant the last 30 feet to the boat, but 30 seconds, yeah. Yeah, every fish that's lost is lost right there at the end of the fight.
Yeah, it's in the fight.
I haven't had one that's lost at the beginning of the fight, have you?
Right now.
Okay.
May have been a short fight, but it was always the end of the fight.
That's right. When he said it was done, it was done.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's kind of our basics on wahoo fishing, what we target. I know there's a ton to it. So if you guys have any questions, send us your questions, and we can do another episode on wahoo, or a specific video, or a specific technique, or things like that.
Yeah. And if you got any tips, we take tips too. Holes, if you got some good holes, we'll be happy to go check them out for you.
Yeah.
We're not shy, and we'll let you know that your hole was good if we get some there.
We'll credit you on the video.
Exactly.
So and so provided. We've done that too.
And we have actually done that
people
too.
have have sent us numbers and helped us out, and we appreciate it.
That's kind of funny because, some people, they'll leave at like 1 in the morning just so you won't see their boat going out, sneaking out. And other people are like, hey, man, they're biting over here, come over. So you just never know.
Yeah. But thanks to everyone for watching or listening. If you're listening via podcast, if you're watching by YouTube, either way, we'd appreciate it if you follow us, subscribe, check out our videos and content and stuff like that. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time.
On the next episode of Real Hazardous.
Yep.